What's up, guys? Welcome to November 1st as we dive into John chapter 18, verses 1 to 2. Jesus prays in Gethsemane. After saying these things, Jesus crossed the Kidron Valley with his disciples and entered a grove of olive trees. Judas, the betrayer, knew this place because Jesus had often gone there with his disciples. Mark chapter 14, verses 32 to 42. They went to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and Jesus said, "Sit here while I go and pray." He took Peter, James, and John with him, and he became deeply troubled and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went on a little further and fell to the ground. He prayed that if it were possible, the awful hour awaiting him might pass him by. "Abba, Father," he cried out, "everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." Then he returned and found the disciples asleep. He said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Couldn't you watch with me even an hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Then Jesus left them again and prayed the same prayer as before. When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open, and they didn't know what to say. When he returned to them the third time, he said, "Go ahead and sleep, have your rest. But no, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here." Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 to 46. Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, "Sit here while I go over there to pray." He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went on a little further and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." Then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, "Couldn't you watch with me even an hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Then Jesus left them a second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done." When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went to pray a third time, saying the same things again. Then he came to the disciples and said, "Go ahead and sleep, have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here." Luke chapter 22, verses 39 to 46. Then, accompanied by the disciples, Jesus left the upstairs room and went as usual to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, "Pray that you will not give in to temptation." He walked away about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will be done, not mine." Then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. He prayed more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. At last he stood up again and returned to the disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you will not give in to temptation." Mark chapter 14, verses 43 to 52. Jesus is betrayed and arrested. And immediately, even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the leading priests, the teachers of religious law, and the elders. The traitor Judas had given them a prearranged signal. "You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss. Then you can take him away under guard." As soon as they arrived, Judas walked up to Jesus. "Rabbi," he exclaimed, and gave him the kiss. Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. But one of the men with Jesus pulled out his sword and struck the high priest's slave, slashing off his ears. He asked them, "Am I some dangerous revolutionary that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there among you teaching every day. But these things are happening to fulfill what the scriptures say about me." Then all his disciples deserted him and ran away. One young man following behind was clothed only in a long linen shirt. When the mob tried to grab him, he slipped out of his shirt and ran away naked. Matthew chapter 26, verses 47 to 56. And even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the leading priests and elders of the people. The traitor Judas had given them a prearranged signal. "You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss." So Judas came straight to Jesus. "Greetings, Rabbi," he exclaimed, and gave him the kiss. Jesus said, "My friend, go ahead and do what you have come for." Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. But one of the men with Jesus pulled out his sword and struck the high priest's slave, slashing off his ears. "Put away your sword," he told him. "Those who use a sword will die by the sword. Don't you realize that I could ask my Father for thousands of angels to protect us, and he would send them in instantly? But if I did, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that described what must happen now?" Then Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I some dangerous revolutionary that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there teaching every day. But this is all happening to fulfill the words of the prophets as recorded in the scriptures." At that point, all the disciples deserted him and fled. Luke chapter 22, verses 47 to 53. But even as Jesus said this, a crowd approached, but led by Judas, one of the 12 disciples. Judas walked over to Jesus to greet him with a kiss, but Jesus said, "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" When the other disciples saw what was about to happen, they exclaimed, "Lord, shall we fight?" We brought the swords. And one of them struck at the high priest's slave, slashing off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus spoke to the leading priests, the captains of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him. "And am I some dangerous revolutionary?" he asked. "Then you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there every day. But this is your moment, the time when the power of darkness reigns." John chapter 18, verses 3 to 11. The leading priests and Pharisees had given Judas a contingent of Roman soldiers and temple guards to accompany him. Now, with blazing torches, lanterns, and weapons, they arrived at the olive grove. Jesus fully realized all that was going to happen to him, so he stepped forward to meet them. "Who are you looking for?" they asked. "Jesus, the Nazarene," they replied. "I am he said. Jesus said, Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. As Jesus said, "I am he," they all drew back and fell to the ground. Once more he asked them, "Who are you looking for?" And again they replied, "Jesus the Nazarene." "I told you that I am he," Jesus said. "And since I am the one you want, let these others go." He did this to fulfill his own statement. I did not lose a single one of those you have given me." Then Simon Peter drew his sword and slashed off the right ear of Malchus, the high priest's slave. But Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword away. Put your sword back into its sheath. Shall I not drink from the cup of suffering the Father has given me?" Annas questions Jesus. So the soldiers, the commanding officer, and the temple guards arrested Jesus and tied him up. First, they took him to Annas, where he was the father, since he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest at that time. Caiaphas was the one who had told the other Jewish leaders, "It's better that one man should die for the people." Peter's first denial. Simon Peter followed Jesus, as did another of the disciples. That other disciple was accompanied with the high priest, so he was allowed to enter the high priest's courtyard with Jesus. Peter had to stay outside the gate. Then the disciple who knew the high priest spoke to the woman watching at the gate, and she let Peter in. The woman asked Peter, "You're not one of that man's disciples, are you?" "No," he said, "I am not." Because it was cold, the household servants and the guards had made a charcoal fire. They stood around it, warming themselves, and Peter stood with them, warming himself. The high priest questions Jesus. Inside, the high priest began asking Jesus about his followers and what he had been teaching them. Jesus replied, "Everyone knows what I teach. I have preached regularly in the synagogues and the temple where the people gather. I have not spoken in secret. Why are you asking me this question? Ask those who heard me. They know what I said." Then one of the temple guards standing nearby slapped Jesus across the face. "Is that the way to answer the high priest?" he demanded. Jesus replied, If I said anything wrong, you must prove it. But if I am speaking the truth, why are you beating me?" Then Annas bound Jesus and sent him to Caiaphas, the high priest. And so that's the end for today. Again, Jesus asked, "Why did you strike me?" Prove to everyone that he did one thing, like he lied about one thing, which he didn't lie about. So it's like a reflection of our hearts, if we're being honest, right? We blame Jesus for things, but in reality, are any of the things that we accuse him of, making our life miserable, not making this happen, and this and that, making our life miserable, do we really think that's Jesus' intentions? I think that's what we do a lot. We blame Jesus more. Sometimes we blame him more than we actually praise him. And that itself is pretty scary to even think about. And then Peter's first denial. We all have denied Jesus in moments in our lives. Let's not hop on this high horse thinking that we are better than Peter, because we're not. But like learning when have we let fear control our faith? Like, when have we let fear overpower our faith instead of the other way around? And then Jesus was betrayed and arrested. Before that, he was sweating because of how much anxiety he's facing. Jesus was actually sweating blood, which I don't really know what that feels like, but it's painful. All I know is like people, like doctors who's medically educated, says how painful it is to sweat blood because of how much stress that Jesus was in, and probably the temperature as well. But it shows that like Jesus has that human side of him as well. That human side of the flesh trying to fight against the spirit. His spirit, Jesus' spirit wants to accomplish God's will, but his flesh is trying to deny him. And yet Jesus was able to not only overpower his temptation to run away, but to also a representation to show that there is no, our flesh, the stress on our flesh could be hard sometimes. But if Jesus can do it, why cannot us? If we ask him in his name to strengthen us,
an official message,
Medicare. And yeah, I don't really know what else to share, because it's just like a lot of moments in which Jesus showed us that the flesh can sometimes feel so strong. The desire to our fleshly desires that wants to do the wrong things and everything else. But again, Jesus shows that you can overpower the flesh, your fleshly desires, if you discipline your spirit, if your spirit is stronger than your flesh. And then it shows how James, John, and Peter and all the other disciples, they let their flesh overpower their faith, overpower their spirit, and that's why they're falling asleep. And so kind of reflecting on one half, we have moments where we let our flesh overpower our faith, where it changed our lives, or it made our lives much more difficult than if we have just trusted Jesus, put our faith ahead of our flesh. And so I hope what I shared is helpful a little bit. Like I said, it's not like a whole lot to reflect on, just because this is like the beginning of Jesus' suffering. And we read the first time that Peter denied knowing Jesus. But I just reflect on how the way that Jesus approached his suffering, and how that really changed the way that you live your own life. So may you go and walk with God today.